So today, without the help of Tom Cruise or Beyonce, we will tell you why you should care about the Jones Act. We may even make you passionate about the Jones Act, just as our panelists are very passionate, pro and con, about the Jones Act. Now, as Jay mentioned, the official name of the entire law is the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. The Jones Act specifically refers to Section 27, and that requires that all goods transported by water between U.S. ports must be carried in ships that are U.S. flagged, built in the U.S., owned by U.S. citizens, and crewed by either U.S. citizens or American permanent residents. And since most everything that is imported to Hawaii comes from the U.S. West Coast, that must be carried by U.S. ships with U.S. crews. Now, if you want to bring goods directly from, say, China to Hawaii, you could use a foreign ship, but that rarely happens. Oil tankers, of course, bring foreign oil here, but rarely do freighters come here to Hawaii from foreign ports. Now let's get started with our panelists. The format here is each panelist will have 5 minutes to tell us why they are passionate about the Jones Act, what it means to them. And because we have 6 panelists, I'm going to hold off my questions until they're all done. We will also have time for your questions. Jay, are there cards at the tables? There will be cards at the tables. Please, if you have a question, please fill out one of the index cards. Make it readable for me, please. And I will get to as many of those as possible. Let's get to our panelists. Our first panelist is Bob Frame. He's an attorney with the firm of Frame and Nakano. He specializes in maritime law and other issues. Bob is also a graduate of the U.S. Coast Guard Academy, and he served in the Coast Guard Reserve for many years and retired as a captain. Please welcome Bob Frame. And could I ask the panelists to come up to the lectern to give their 5-minute presentation?
There's 2 aspects of the Jones Act that I'd like to address. First is the national picture. The Jones Act is in place for a very good reason. That is national security. If we don't have U.S. vessels and crew that can operate them, in a time of national emergency, we would not have the sea lift capability necessary to get the goods to the troops in the field. And this is actually one of the reasons, a major reason, that the Jones Act came into being, because prior to World War I, we were not in a position to get goods to the war that we knew we were going to be entering. Today, the U.S. merchant fleet, for instance, in the most recent conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, 90% of the cargo that was transported to those war zones were carried by U.S. flagged vessels that were readily available and would not have been able to be transported if we had to contract out or charter vessels from foreign governments. They would be glad to provide us with the hulls, but at horrendous high costs. The shipping in the United States carries approximately 25% of all the cargo shipped by any means in the United States. And it does that for 2% of the cost. The total freight bill is 2% for 25% cargo. So it is a bargain, as opposed to rail and trucking and air, of course. Now, the shipping industry, and when I say shipping industry, I'm talking about not only the ships, the sailors, but the shipbuilding, the terminal facilities, and such, accounts for about $100 billion annual economic output. The labor compensation to the people that work in that industry is about $29 billion. And I don't want to bore you with numbers, but the bottom line is that the American fleet, which is comprised of about 40,000 vessels, is the envy of all the countries in the world, and is absolutely necessary for national security. Now, the issue comes up many times, and it flares every few years here in Hawaii. Why don't we have an exception? Because we need to have our goods brought in by sea because we have no rail, we have no trucking, and it's just not feasible to bring items by air. It's too costly, and number two, it's impractical because you can't fit cars on the planes, and you can't bring petroleum in. The problem with that is that if we opened the trade between the mainland and here to foreign shipping, there's no guarantee that the shipping is going to be lower. And we could also face the prospect of foreign shipping coming in, reducing their prices, which they can do because, number one, they don't have to comply with our environmental regulations. They pay their seamen virtually nothing, and they are subsidized by their governments. The United States fleet is not subsidized. So they could come in, drive the domestic carriers out of the trade, and then where would we be? Matson, Horizon, Pasha, they're not going to mothball their fleets, they're going to take them someplace else, or they're going to go buy foreign vessels. In which case, there's no way we compete, and our seamen would be out of work, and most importantly, the shipbuilding industry would absolutely disappear in this country. So at a time of national emergency, we would have no capability of replenishing the fleet. Also, if we had foreign shipping between the mainland and Hawaii, we would have a situation where the subsidized carriers might have some internal conflict that would cause them to leave the trade. It could be an economic downturn in Japan, social unrest in China, political considerations in Korea. And if they were to leave, there's no guarantee anybody would come back in at a reasonable price to replace them. So the bottom line is that for a modest cost to the consumer here, we have the protection and the security of having our goods delivered fairly and on time and a regular schedule. That would not be the case if we had foreign shipping, and also most of the carriers, well, all the carriers that are involved in this trade here from the mainland to Hawaii, they ship very little back to the mainland. There's no way that a foreign carrier is going to want to do that trade, so they would come, bring what's necessary to Hawaii, and go on to Asia or elsewhere, and our goods that we need to get to the mainland would not be shipped. Also, am I running out of time? They're up. Okay. I can get into the cost later, and I'm sure everybody else will be addressing the cost because that's one factor that drives the flare-up of the let's do away with the Jones Act every few years.
Our second panelist is our mystery panelist, Michael Hansen. He's the president of the Hawaii Shippers Council, which is an association of companies that ship cargo on these ships, on the Jones Act ships. He's been working in the maritime industry since the early 1970s, and currently he's active in shipbroking and consulting with his colleagues in London and Singapore. Please welcome Mike Hansen.
Thank you for inviting me. I'd like to start off with just a little of the Jones Act. The Jones Act, of course, is the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. It was introduced by Wesley Jones. He's the fellow on the picture that was passed around a little bit earlier. He was a senator from the state of Washington and a Republican. And he introduced the Jones Act into Congress essentially for the purpose of excluding Canadian merchants and ship owners from the Alaska trade and protecting that trade for his constituents, the merchants of Seattle. This has been documented in the book Alaska by James Michener, and it's also was dealt with by the former governor of Alaska, Willie Hinkle, in his book on Alaska. Interestingly, when in 1921, after the act was passed, the territory of Alaska actually sued the federal government trying to overturn the Jones Act on the basis that it was a violation of the Commerce Clause. The Solicitor General at the time argued that states or territories didn't have the same rights as states, so Alaska didn't have a case, and the Supreme Court agreed with them. People often say that the Jones Act was created for national security, but it was in fact just an ordinary piece of protectionist commercial legislation. The Jones Act, of course, or the most important part of the Merchant Marine Act, or the Jones Act, is the cabotage provisions. And that's what is involved when a nation protects its coastal trade for its own vessels. And this is a common practice around the world. Some countries, for example, the United Kingdom, have over the last 20 years or so relaxed their cabotage restrictions quite a lot and do allow foreign flag ships to carry cargoes along their coasts. The Jones Act generally requires vessels to be registered in the United States, to be U.S. built, to be U.S. crewed, and the requirement is that all the officers have to be citizens, and 75% of the ratings have to be citizens. The balance can be green card holders. And on the ownership side, the ship must be 75% citizen owned. While nearly every coastal nation has some form of cabotage, the U.S. system is often described as being super cabotage because it is so restrictive. In particular, the build and ownership requirements. Another important part of the Jones Act is the section that deals with seamen's rights. And this is often what people see when they go onto the internet, for example. An internet search of the Jones Act will turn up mostly maritime lawyers who are doing Jones Act personal interest law. And the Jones Act, is, when it was passed, the provisions on seamen's rights were modeled after an earlier piece of legislation passed in 1908 for railroad workers called the Federal Employers Liability Act. And that allowed the employee to sue the company, which was a novel concept at that time. And it gave first the railroad workers and then the seamen the ability to be compensated for an accident at work or some injury. Later, of course, these kinds of situations have been handled under workers' compensation. However, any attempt to change the railroads and the shipping situation to workers' compensation has been opposed by many of the people involved in that practice. The stevedores are covered under the Longshore Harbor Workers Act, which is a separate federal workmen's compensation jurisdiction, so, which is separate from the Jones Act remedies. The Shippers Council, we have recently put forward a proposal to reform the Jones Act in a very narrow and targeted way. Basically, we would like to exempt the non-contiguous jurisdictions or non-contiguous domestic trades, that would be Alaska, Guam, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, from the U.S. build requirement for large ocean-going ships, which would deal with most of the problems that we're seeing in the shipping trades now. Thank you.
Our third panelist is Representative Colleen Hanabusa, who has represented the 1st Congressional District of Hawaii in the U.S. House of Representatives since 2010. Before that, she served 12 years in the Hawaii State Senate, including 4 as President of the Senate. Please welcome Representative Hanabusa.
Aloha, everyone. Aloha. Right up front, I am a supporter of the Jones Act, and let me explain to you why. It is my role on the Armed Services Committee that has enhanced my support for the Jones Act. Let me briefly tell you about what they asked me to speak about, and what they asked me to speak about was legislation pending. There's some legislation pending, but nothing like Senate Bill 3525, which was called the Open America's Waters Act, which was proposed in 2010 by Senator McCain, who just wanted to repeal it. Nothing has happened since then, and that was the 111th Congress, so in order for it to be taken up, it has to be reintroduced, and it hasn't been introduced in this Congress as far as I know. Now, in addition to that, we've had bills to assess, in other words, to study what defense would be like without merchant marines. It's also had what it would impact on, for example, shipbuilding in the United States. We've also had some bills to look at exempting cruise ships, and we've had a bill to look at Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico seems to be leading a charge on Jones Act modifications. That's basically it in a nutshell. So that gives me the rest of the time to tell you about why I support the Jones Act. First of all, for those of you who participated or watched with interest APEC in November of last year, you do know that the President of the United States made it very clear, and he said that the 21st century is going to be defined by Asia Pacific, and we are pivoting to Asia Pacific. And he said that the 21st century will be defined as one in conflict or one in cooperation, depending upon how Asia Pacific reacts. Asia Pacific is about, if you look at just the jurisdictional waters of PACOM, Pacific Command, it's about 52% of the Earth's surface, and most of it is water. It has within it 36 countries, and it also has the 3 of the top economies of the world, the United States, China, and Japan. But it also has this whole issue of the various trade organizations and the treaties that are trying to be entered into. You've heard Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which has 4 members, and they're trying to expand that. And let me explain to you what their main focus is. TPP's main focus is the presence of the United States in the Pacific. We've had meetings with the ambassadors who've made it very clear we do not want the United States leaving the Pacific, as they did 10 years ago when they focused on Iraq and Afghanistan. So how does that impact the Jones Act? The Jones Act, let's clarify one thing. Many people don't quite understand what exactly the Jones Act means. We think it means everything has to be completely built in the United States. That's really not true. You're talking about the hull, and you're talking about the fact that the ship is to be assembled in the United States. Everyone thinks it has to be 100% manned. That's also not true. 75%, though the people who actually operate the ships are to be United States. And in addition, the ownership must be 75% of the person must be in the United States. Then think about it. Then what does that all mean in terms of how it affects Hawaii? It means that the crews, merchant marines, on the average, are 20 per ship that comes from the mainland. 20. A lot of people mistake the stevedores or the longshore as covered by the Jones Act. They are not covered by the Jones Act. It is merchant marines. What that does is, if you understand clearly what we're talking about with the Jones Act, you can understand why it is so significant in terms of military. Sitting in armed services, one of the most fascinating revelations that I had was an entity called Transcom. PACOM is Pacific Command, CENTCOM is Central Command. Transcom is really what I call, and this may be aging me, but you know MASH and the Colonel Klinger or Corporal Klinger and how he got everything you wanted? That's what Transcom does. Think about how do you get all our troops and all of our equipment that we need for their protection to where we're going to go. If you think it's put up on a carrier, forget it. It's put up on Matson vessels. It's put upon other vessels. How do we get them there? United Airlines. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about national security. Our role in the Pacific is critical. The United States' role in the Pacific is critical. And that is why the Jones Act is there, not only to provide that necessary merchant marine force that we can conscript, but also the ships that we need to conscript into service. I see him out of the corner of my eye, so that probably means my time is up. So we can continue this discussion. Write me questions. Thank you very much.
Our next panelist is John Carroll, who is an attorney, He's a retired pilot for Hawaiian Airlines of the Korean War. He served 4 terms in the State House, 1 term as a state senator. Please welcome John Carroll.
Aloha, awinala. My name is John Carroll. I came to Hawaii on a merchant ship and as an able-bodied seaman, so please do not think that my antagonism to the Jones Act has anything to do with antagonism towards seamen. Hawaii should and can be the most prosperous place in the entire world. Economically stable, environmentally protected paradise. That's what we should have. We don't have it, and we don't have it because of the Jones Act. Now, Jay Fidel asked us to, ladies don't get upset with this, but he asked us to capsulize in one word what our position was on the Jones Act. And the one word that I can think of that really makes sense is screwed, because that's what happens to everybody in this state because of the Jones Act, unless you own Alexander Baldwin or Matson stock. Now, having said that, we have to talk about what Hawaii would look like if we got rid of the Jones Act. Number one, I think most of us can remember Lonnie Moo and when we had dairies and chickens and fresh eggs and things of that sort. Right now, we have none of that. We've lost 9 dairies. I think 1 or 2 have tried to come back. I'm able, because of being military retired, to buy in the commissary. Milk is $3.50 for half a gallon. A gallon of milk in Seattle is $2.95. That is what our people are looking at here. We've got joblessness, homelessness, and we've got an economy that's really in the pits. And frankly, that's why I ran for the U.S. Senate. And I want to thank Linda Lingle for inviting you all here today to hear me speak. So. That's a joke in case anybody. With respect to one thing that I do want to say, and I will be able to take questions, and I know we're limited to 5 minutes here, but I have actually 8 great-grandchildren coming up, and I'm very, very concerned about the future. I have been working against the Jones Act since 1970. House Concurrent Resolution 0014 was an anti-Jones Act resolution. I've been passionately against it ever since that time, and I will continue to do so. First of all, and I'm surprised that Representative Hanabusa would, and I'm sure she must know about this, but in 1801, there was a case in the U.S. Supreme Court, the dispute between New York and New Jersey over shipping. And the Chief Justice Marshall said in that holding, regardless of the location of a state or its ports, every state should have equal access to interstate commerce with the states, nations, and the Indian tribes, right out of the Commerce Clause. For Hawaii to be cut off from commerce as we are is absolutely violative of the U.S. Constitution. You hear about the Alaska one? Judge Ezra threw me out in 2010 when I filed one against the United States on the basis that we didn't have particularity with our damages claim. Well, we have one now. I think some of you probably read about Mr. Novak, Patrick Novak. His shipping costs went from $4,000 a container to $11,500 a container, and ran him out of business and cost him $4 million. That is what's happening. That is the kind of thing that's happening because of the Jones Act. I have a white paper. We still have my website up, which is www.carrollforsenate.com. There's a white paper on the Jones Act there. You can get it by typing it in. I also saved I brought a few copies if anybody wants to see it. I really, really thank every one of you folks for coming, and especially the longshoremen. I understand Longshoremen Union is here today. I talked to Isaac Fiesta, who was one of the leaders of the ILWU down in Hilo, and I said, Isaac, what is the name of your union? Isn't that ILWU? What is that L for? And it's longshoremen, isn't it? What do longshoremen do? Well, they unload boats. Well, if we go to the harbor, what are we going to see? He said, well, I don't know, barge maybe. I said, well, how can you be in favor of a law that keeps you from having ships coming into Hawaii? Well, I never heard back from him or from Bobo Pina, but for the seamen, I mean the people that could be working, I wish that they would think about that. I'd like to thank every one of you folks for coming. Mahalo, meki aloha.
Our next panelist is Jay Friedheim. He is an attorney with the firm Admiralty Advocates. Jay defends the rights of sailors. He also happens to be one of my neighbors in Lanikai.
I didn't come up with one word to describe my speech. I had it hyphenated, saving seamen. and where the reference was to screwing people here as consumers, I've been out there trying to make sure that seamen's rights have been protected as best as I'm able to, and quite frankly, the longshoremen are next, and we're standing up not just to protect a healthy ability to have vessels and cargoes moved back and forth, but we want to make sure that there is competent, trained, and conscientious people loading and unloading those vessels. A few of the things that, I'd like to read a quote here. Reduced to its essential terms, the Jones Act simply requires companies operating in the domestic commerce of the United States to comply with U.S. laws. This requirement includes corporate taxes, the National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, Coast Guard standards employing American citizens. American ships are subject to these laws and foreign ships are not. The same fundamental principle applies to every other company doing business in the United States, from agriculture to retail. That is a quote 15 years ago from R.J. Pfeiffer, who was personally a mentor in my life and encouraged me to go out there and do what I do. And I think a lot of people here are affected by what he has done, and thank God that that company survives, and it's in the hands of people of the level of Walter Dodds who have the vision to make sure that America stays safe. My role here is to tell you about seamen's rights. And historically, seamen were about the most abused workers in the history of the world. It was Eleanor of Aquitaine who got her son Richard Lionheart to introduce a law into the laws of England on maintenance and cure, which is the most minimal amount of care that could be given to individuals. And before that, if a seaman was injured and he was a burden to the ship, he was thrown overboard or left at the last port that or the next port that they came to. And that was exactly what we had here in Hawaii when it was a kingdom of Hawaii. And I think it's unfair to characterize the Jones Act in the way that it was characterized as being some sort of protectionist legislation. Let me read you the first lines of the Jones Act from June 5th, 1920. The Act sets forth the declared policy of this country to encourage the building and maintenance of a strong merchant marine. This section stated, it is necessary for the national defense and for the proper growth of its foreign and domestic commerce that the United States shall have a merchant marine of the best equipped and most suitable types of vessels sufficient to carry the greater portion of its commerce and to serve as a naval and military auxiliary in the time of war or national emergency, ultimately to be owned and operated privately by citizens of the United States, and it is declared to be the policy of the United States to do whatever may be necessary to develop and encourage the maintenance of such a merchant marine. That's what the Jones Act is about. It's not, unfortunately, we're part of the non-contiguous states. I'm not some, pilgrim who came back from the Holy Land to tell you, I've seen the light. But I just came back 2 days ago from Alaska, in which I've met with congressional and state officials there, as well as in my work in helping stevedores. And it's the same problem. They're talking about the Jones Act too. You understand what non-contiguous means, that we're not directly connected to the rest of the United States. Historically, when I was a kid, I worked with a guy named Buckminster Fuller. My kids have no idea who this guy is. Maybe some people here. He was a naval architect. He was a Navy guy. But he had great vision about the world. And he told me a story about cabotage. And that's about protecting the coastwise trade. All the way back to the Phoenicians, every nation that abandoned its cabotage laws is gone. They are no longer players in the world. Protecting the coastwise trade is absolutely necessary. It's a greater vision than the fact that you're standing in Safeway and you got to pay a few more bucks for those eggs, and it turns out, as Colleen has pointed out, the egg story is a joke. It really isn't more money. Somehow we have to make adjustments here. We need to protect the interests of America first, and we need to stimulate the economy of Hawaii. And stimulating the economy of Hawaii means that we need a strong merchant marine, and we need to have companies like Matson and Horizon and Young Brothers and all these places that employ these workers healthy and surviving. You start bringing in foreign vessels here that are not complying with the laws of the United States, and very shortly, those companies will have a great deal of difficulty in surviving, may disappear, and we're going to be replaced. Am I done?
Okay. Our next panelist is Matthew Digeronimo. He runs Smith Floyd, which is a local mergers and acquisitions company. Matt trained as a nuclear engineer and served as an officer on a fast attack submarine base here at Pearl Harbor. He was also honored this year as one of Hawaii Business Magazine's 20 for the next 20. Please welcome Matt Digeronimo.
The one word that I would have to use in describing the Jones Act, and unfortunately I'm going to use two, but I think they might be synonyms, and it's politics and misinformation. Okay, it's just that simple. I'm the one who handed out the picture of Senator Jones, just so we could take a look at. I mean, this is the individual that's responsible for the reason we're gathered here today. They make no mistake, it's the Jones Act. This is Senator Jones. Okay? And I think there's so many opportunities here to confuse the public about what we're talking about with the Jones Act, that we just consistently just smoke and mirrors, and then we all leave kind of confused and emotional about things that don't even necessarily apply to what we're talking about. So let's keep it simple and start at the beginning. Senator Jones was protecting the shipbuilders in Seattle. They were in competition with the shipbuilders in Canada for exporting the goods from Alaska. It's just that simple. You can look it up. There's nothing, you could read the legislation all you want. We're great about writing things to make it sound a certain way. He was fighting so that his shipbuilders, his ships would be able to export the goods from Alaska, and he won. And his victory got him the name, the Jones Act. And that's why we're here. Okay, so that's a fact. Okay, now second fact, for a moment, for us in Hawaii, let's stop talking about the Jones Act at a national level. Let's just all agree that no one's going to repeal the Jones Act, and that the Jones Act will be around as it was originally intended, which was to allow domestic shipping to be done only on U.S.-built ships. Okay, so let's stop talking about it at a national level. Okay, the Jones Act is here to stay. Okay, so that removes like 80% of the conversation. All right, now let's talk about Hawaii. And on the back end, or the other side of this picture of Senator Jones, and I intentionally didn't label it because I don't like people trying to read while I'm talking. The top graph is the Consumer Price Index in the last 10 years of Hawaii versus the nation. And you can see that the cost of living in Hawaii is not only greater than on the mainland, but it's getting greater. The rate is getting greater. Every day it's more expensive to live in Hawaii. The second graph is the average annual income of a person working in the private sector in Hawaii versus the mainland. And the people in Hawaii, the private sector people in Hawaii, are making less and make it every day lesser than the people on the mainland. That is, those two graphs should paint a picture for Hawaii. That's not sustainable. So we need to do something. And as an advocate for small business owners who don't typically have the opportunity to use this microphone, who don't typically have an opportunity to speak on the floor of Congress, who don't typically have an opportunity to donate enough money to politicians to have them actually speak on their behalf, talk to any small business owner, the cost of shipping is destroying smoke and mirrors. Our cost of electricity in Hawaii is the highest in the nation. Okay, liquid natural gas, do you realize that we cannot, it's illegal for the state of Hawaii to import liquid natural gas from the mainland. And there's a ton of liquid natural gas available in Alaska, and every time companies look at setting up shop there, they say, nah, because there's no company in America that has the capability of building a ship that can transport liquid natural gas. There's no company that has the capability. So we cannot export liquid natural gas to Hawaii. Which, right, and anyone from RICO here will tell you, we could use liquid natural gas very simply if we could just get it here, and our cost of electricity would go down. So this is all, in my opinion, it's about freeing up cash flow in the economy. And whatever we have to do to free up cash flow in the economy, that's what creates jobs. Okay, everything else is the status quo, and everything else is politics. Thank you.